needs your voice. I am PCC, you're BNTU, Madam President. Could we please try to get reassembled? I don't know if the people underneath that tree can hear me, and I know you might be prone to sub umbra florero. Under the shade we flourish, but we please need you to come back into the auditorium that we can go into Mr. Ross's presentation. Teachers, please. Do you have anybody could? The teachers under the saman tree, better known as a rain tree, could you kindly come back under the auditorium, please? Yeah, go ahead. Let me get your chair.
Good afternoon, teachers. We are going to resume. Those teachers underneath the tree. I know you all want to head back by 3 o'clock, but you are deciding the time by not coming back. I'm waiting. We will continue when you're back. Those teachers at the back. Our next speaker is ready to begin, and we have a scheduled time for this afternoon so we can finish by 3 o'clock. So in the meantime, while we get ready, it is important for us, I'll use this opportunity while we get our teachers to come back. For those teachers having trouble getting into the TLI, we had a meeting with ministry and they're asking that you please verify that the information in your license matches what you have on the TLI platform. The TLI platform is also case sensitive. So if you capitalize something, it will make a difference and it reads the information as if though it's two different persons. If any variation exists between what your license has and what the TLI platform has, if you sign in once with one email account and then you try with a different one because you forgot, it's going to block you. It's also important that you know that the transitioning from the TEDs to TLI and with the staffing, it's taking a bit longer. So what they're doing is catering to teachers whose licenses are about to expire and prioritizing them in getting their hours in order. So if your license is not about to expire, they tend to push you back and tend to those who they need to prioritize. So it is in transition, and you know when we're transitioning into anything new, there is a bottleneck created. But they promise that it's improving. By the end of the year, it should be an easy flow of information, but it will help significantly if you all go in and check that your data from their license matches the data from the TLI, all right? And it's important that you check because in checking, some teachers have found out that they have 2 licenses and they didn't even know. So please go in and check your data. Teachers under the tree, we're waiting. Our guest speaker is going to go down the aisle to interact with teachers. That's the reason I need teachers to come this direction. Mr. Ross? Okay. Our chair of the People's Constitution Commission will now introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Commissioner. Cesar Ross. Cesar is probably not a stranger to most of you. He's actually born in the Corozal district, and you might have seen him running around with a short pants when he was younger, without the ponytail. But he's been a lifelong educator, and he's taught at the high school for 7 years, followed by nearly 26 years at the University of Belize, or at the university level, 23 and a half of those years being at the University of Belize. During those years, Cesar served 10 years on the executive of BNTU, Belize National Indigenous Council, Vice Chair of the National Heritage Library Board, Vice Chair of the Belize Commission, Initiative for Justice and Reparations, and as President of the Maya Institute of Belize. Currently, Cesar Ross is the Director of the Good Governance Unit in the Ministry of the Public Service, Constitutional and Political Reform and Religious Affairs, which is focused on the National Good Governance Agenda and head of the Secretariat of the People's Constitution Commission, which involves in public education / public consultation. The public education campaign is what is being rolled out today. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to please put your hands together and help me to welcome Cesar Ross. He will be presenting on the topics good governance and accountability. Cesar.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman. Everybody can hear me, right? Before I start talking about good governance, earlier, sorry about that. Earlier, I think I was kind of put on the spot because a question about corruption and the agenda on corruption came up, and the Vice Chair made it clear that if there is any question in that nature, that I am supposed to answer for that. Right? So, because of the role of BNTU in the Anti-Corruption Convention, and I can recall 2016 very, very strongly, right? I was out there, I was making sure I took bags of water and shared around with the BNTU members of the Bamapan and Cayo area, and hopefully I helped in some way. But what is important is that while it wasn't until after that protest that the government acceded to the UNCAC convention, right? Even though that convention had been put out to the members of the United Nations since 2003, and the measures to implement were put out since 2009, there was no activity by our government for their own reasons, and I'm not going to delve into answering that. But after 2016, when the government was sort of prompted into acceding to that convention, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime quickly said, okay, let's put the first cycle of evaluation of review was between 2010 and 2015. And Belize did that first cycle between December 2016 and 2018. Late, right? But it started because of that process of prompting. After the review in 2018, some proposals were made. like a lot of things, proposals, reports developed, and they were shelved, right? For whatever reason, and I can't answer that, it's above my pay grade. The current administration decided, because of their, as the chairman said, their agenda, their plan believes to work with good governance and a good governance agenda. Last year, in very early last year, they created, right, a new department, a new ministry called the Constitution and Political Reform Ministry as such. And it was given to Minister Henry Charles Usher, who was then in charge of the Ministry of Public Service, Constitutional and Political Reform, and Religious Affairs. And so with that creation of that unit there, the government, the cabinet said, okay, here, you are responsible for one, creating a good governance agenda. And when we talk about governance, we're not only talking about national government, we're talking about all the multiple layers of governance in this country, right? Because municipal government also needs to create an agenda of good governance. Village councils also need to be driven by an agenda of good governance. Other government agencies, non-PSR, non-public service agencies, like the University of Belize, like NICH, like Social Security, like DFC, all of them need to become part of this good governance agenda. So that was one. The second thing they said was, okay, we have a responsibility to a number of anti-corruption conventions out there. Get them on board and see to the process of implementing, right? And then after a couple of months, they came back and said, oh, and we are launching a People's Constitution Commission. You did know that too. So there is these multiple things on our table. For a few days, commissioners like Ms. Ruth were angry with me because Monday the 21st, Tuesday the 22nd, and Wednesday the 23rd, I really was not able to respond to a lot of the things that they were requesting of the Secretariat, and I passed on the responsibility to the rest of the Secretariat, and you know, hopefully that helped it along. But I say that because on the 21st, the 22nd, and 23rd of August, which was just earlier this week, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime and the UNCAC country experts came to Belize to do a comprehensive review as to our readiness to onboard UNCAC, right? They have gone back after meeting with about 22 different government agencies, and we had to be coordinating all of that from July to August. They met with NTUCB, representation from NTUCB, from the Belize Chamber of Commerce, from civil society as such. And hopefully, they are going to tell us you are nearly there. And I say nearly because of the list of foundational laws that we need. We are close to having drafted since early last year to now and implementing. Just a couple of weeks ago, we finally got the assent from the Governor General for the Civil Asset Recovery and Unexplained Wealth Act. When that one crossed the Governor General's desk, we brought a sigh of relief. Another one conquered. We still have the protected disclosures, which is the whistleblowers bill, to get across as such. And then after that, there's one more. There's one more, and it's the one that we have left for last because we know it's the one that's going to give us the most trouble. campaign finance reform, a policy, a system that requires political parties to register themselves. And in registering themselves, they become bound to reporting what they do, reporting where they get money for campaign finance, at least a certain level up. Supporters who give them $10 or $20, that's okay. But those big amounts, right? They will need to do that, and politicians, that's who we are going to cross lines with when it comes to that. But we have a commitment that they will sit with us, right? And some type of campaign finance reform that meets international standards. The golden standards of campaign finance reform will be implemented, right? Before this cycle is over. And so I simply wanted to share that with you all, because I know that is one of the things that the teachers and the BNTU were instrumental in pushing. And so you all need to know what is happening when it comes to that as such, no? So, having said that, my task today was to talk about, for the People's Constitution Commission and the People's Constitution Commission public education on the Constitution reform process. And as the chairman indicated, it is a process. This is not the end all. Having you here come and having a one-day session is not the end all of this process. It's the beginning. It's the beginning, because as Ms. Schumann has been making clearly, you can't move a public education without the teachers of this country. You have to get them on board. You have to get them to understand the basics of this reform process so that they can become the managers as such of this process. The People's Constitution Commission job is not to decide what is going in the Constitution. The Constitution Commission job is to find out from you all and the rest of Belizeans, what is it that Belizeans want? And by Belizeans, we are talking about in-country and in the diaspora. We have a process of trying to get surveys and data from Belizeans in the diaspora. We want their ideas. We kind of know some of their agenda, because over the years they have been making it loud and clear. Right? They want the right to vote. If we keep this Westminster system, they just simply can't get the right to vote, because we vote in a constituency, right? Unless the reform that comes about is that we decide we want 2 of the 31 members of the House, we want 2 of them to represent an at-large constituency out there in the rest of the world. There are certain countries that do that, you know. I think El Salvador has a diaspora voting process, right? And there's a number of other countries, but those are republic systems, purely republic systems in which you vote for the president, because that's a national election, but you can't vote for representatives, because representatives are constituency. And so one clarification I want to make, when the suggestion was that to run you need to have a degree. A clarification, people. When we go to vote, we don't go to vote for ministers. We go to vote for area reps. And area reps are supposed to represent their constituency. And you really, I am all for education. I've been an educator my whole life. But you don't need a degree to represent your constituency the best way possible. There are some of our elders, there are some of our people who may be in the technical areas or even in the school of hard knocks, they say. Learning based on commonsensical processes. Who will be good representatives? What you don't want to do is create a system where a certain class of people are told, sorry, you can't be part of this. Right? There are countries like that. It's called an elitist system. Now, if you are talking about ministers, I am totally in agreement with you. Ministers have to be people that know how to administrate ministries. Right? That's why in certain systems of government, you don't pick ministers out of your area reps, out of your pool of area reps. Right? You don't pick them out of that. That's one possibility, but I know then our area reps will get vexed because some of them are looking forward to being minister after winning as area reps. But that's some of the structural elements as such. And as the vice chair was saying, there's different ways of picking representatives. Bolivia has a system that is a hybrid. About 2/3 of their Congress are elected as area reps. The other third are specifically designated for campesino and indigenous communities to make sure that those communities have representation. Right? So there's different examples. Vice Chair was talking about Guyana. Good example. You know, Guyana, Trinidad have both gone getting a president rather than a governor general, but they do it differently. Guyana, the president has to run on a national election. Trinidad, no. The House of Representatives picks the president, not the people. So there are different ways of getting presidents. There are so much different structures and methodologies in governance. And so the principle of good governance, or the principle of governance in general, people, are basic. One, we know that there has to be a sort of political process. Two, their task is then to manage the resources of the country. And thirdly, there must be a policy arm. Those that will know how to develop the policies that will guide the developments of any given country. Those are the three elements of government. Good governance now is saying, when you consider those three elements, this is what you have to talk about. One, accountability. Is there a mechanism for accountability in our constitution, in our structure of governance? Two, transparency. Is there a clear system of transparency? In other words, any contract signed out there, everybody's supposed to say, I want to see that contract. And we should get access to it. That's a freedom of information process. Right? Secondly, it has to be consensus oriented. In other words, as Mr. Usher said, it has to be a government by the people and for the people. So the people have to play an important role. Right? Okay? Next, efficiency. In other words, you have to create a government that is efficient and responsive. In other words, make sure you don't have one lot of waste in government. Right? You are managing taxpayers' money, and taxpayers are already telling you, and I heard it loud and clear, only charge with too much tax. And if we were seeing that tax used for things that we really like, we really believe in, maybe I could tolerate that. But I don't know what to do with the taxpayers' money. So I don't want to pay that much tax because I don't see where the tax money is going as such. Right? Okay? So all of these responsiveness, that's the one thing that practically every morning on talk shows I hear. I go the lands, I go from Shaibe drive all the way to Baupan for go to lands, for be told the minister can't say you today, I have to come back home and find one next day for go back, or come all the way from Pueblo Viejo in Toledo to just to be told I have to come back and forth because they don't have time. That's responsiveness, and that's what we need. And again, there are systems that look at that. There are systems that look like that. I sat down and drafted up a little proposal where I looked at one of the systems that Singapore was using. And Singapore has, in every region, one major government building. One. And in that government building, when you walk in there, they meet you and tell you, what are you concerned about? Is it about land? Is it about your social security? Is it about your health? Is it about education, scholarship? Whatever you're concerned, that hub, they call it, that hub is responsive to any concern. They don't believe in operating in silos. In other words, they don't believe that you have to have one building for Ministry of Education there, and one building for Ministry of Housing there, and one building for Ministry of Land, no. They're saying your public service has to be a much more responsive and a much more non-silo system, right? And so those principles are very, very important as such. So, where do we put that in the Constitution? Where and how can we build good governance in a Constitution that is much more what responds and accounts and is transparent and follows the rule of law? Following the rule of law means it applies to everybody. Nobody gets more special treatment than anybody else. It applies to everybody. The principle is across the board. So how do we create a constitution like that? The constitution we have, there's a pretty preamble, you know, beautiful preamble. We have had people from other countries tell us it's one of the prettiest preamble. And when you read it, you get excited. But then you want to see that preamble play out in the rest of the Constitution and in the rest of the laws that we create, right? So, that's where we want to begin to explore. How do we look at the executive? Who is the chief of state of this country? Anybody? The head of state. It's not the prime minister, you know? It's not the prime minister, right? Exactly, it's the governor general. How do we feel about that? What do we want to do with that, right? Okay? That is technically the head of the executive. The prime minister is the head of government, not the head of state. Right? So is that structure of that executive, and I hear it loud and clear, practically in every line ministry, they will tell you that there's a public service that are the technical people in the public service in that ministry, but at the end it stops and the minister has the last, the ministerial discretion, they call it. So, okay, how good a thing we put together? Ministers have the last say, right? And if the ministers are not knowledgeable about their ministry, that's when we have problems, right? Okay, that's when we have problems. But let's make sure we are clear. Ministers and area reps are two different things. I remember in my students in 2013, 2014 went on Belize Watch one evening, and they said, how can you be an area rep and represent your area if you become a minister? Because when you become the Minister of Health or the Minister of Education, your responsibility is to everybody in the country. And you have to focus on serving everybody in the country. But as an area rep, you have one constituency. In the next 2 weeks, I have to make a presentation at Messisik, another anti-corruption convention that tells me we need to understand how your country is dealing with conflict of interest. There we go. The biggest conflict of interest is having area representative ministers. Now let me see that quietly because but so the executive, how can we make the executive much more responsive, much more accountable, much more based on the principles of good governance? Let's look at the executive in the Constitution and the things that are required there. The legislature. Let's look at the legislature. I heard people talk about an elected Senate. My fear with an elected Senate is that we just create more politicians, because that's what they become. But I mean, if they are going to be more accountable, and as Vice Chair said, if you have an election one time and there's a sweep, because when we vote either vote out one party altogether or we vote in the next one. And so having a Senate and a House, I don't know that they will make a difference, because we just want to sweep out and the question that Vicky Bradley asked, is it important, is the first question whether we want an elected Senate, or is the first question we should ask, what is the job of that Senate? What are they responsible for? In the Constitution, they do have. Recently, a couple months ago, the House passed a bill and sent it to the Senate. And the leader of government in the Senate said, I am not going to put this out, because even before he would introduce it in the Senate, he already had found out that he was not going to get 7 votes. Because the Senate today, because of the 13th senator, is 7 not government, not administration, and 6 administration. So the government, to get any bill passed, have to convince at least one more that is not of their party. Right? If it's a good bill, there should be no trouble. If it's a good, like civil asset recovery bill, Chamber of Commerce has been pushing that for years. Their senator was glad to support that. The union have been supporting that forever. And so their senator gladly supported that. The NGO senator supported that for years. So if it's a good bill, you're supposed to be able to get the support of the other senators. But if it's a serious and not a good, a partisan-driven bill, then that's when the Senate has just enough leverage to tell you, take this back. Fix it before you bring it back to us. Right? So let's look at what the structure of the Senate is, what is their real responsibilities, and see whether we want to change it. You know, in the white paper of 1981, that was the discussion about the writing of that constitution. There was one track, yeah, you can see, that was arguing we only need one house. We only need one house in government. No bicameral system. We need one house. Right? That's how Singapore do things. There's one house. And when government creates something, it goes through. But it's good for them. That doesn't mean it's good for us. Because in Singapore, a survey done in Singapore, 87% of their population trusted their government. When a survey was done in our area, Belize and the Caribbean, 34% of the population said, we trust our government. So you had over 68% that was saying, nope. So until our government can create a system, a process in which they can regain the trust of the people, people will always be skeptical. And so, maybe looking at that, looking at their Plan Beliefs manifesto, maybe that's why the government is saying, hey, no change constitution. You all tell us. Because I think that then that begins to build trust. If they go ahead and implement what the people are saying. And the good part about this process, people, is that it is strong with checks and balance. Because there's a public education. And then after that, there's a public consultation. And then there's the drafting of a report. And then the report is taken across the country again before it goes to the Prime Minister. I heard somebody ask that question. Yes, the report goes to the people again before it's taken to the Prime Minister. And if the people are asking for major changes, then the House has a commitment, a moral obligation to put that to referendum. It's not like the 2000 political reform process that you could say, oh, I want to take this one, but not, and took about 1/3 of all the recommendations of 2000 that were made. A lot of the recommendations there are things that's one report that maybe we should look for and read, people. There are a lot of good ideas there. Right? Jamaica is doing their reform based on something like that. And so Jamaica picked 14 lawyers and constitution experts. They will write the constitution and they will present that. I'll tell you, this government here is brave to put it before the people. Because Jamaica is saying, we don't put it before the people. We technical secretariat will decide what needs to be changed. I hope their system works. I don't know. And they're saying, please, we're looking at you all. Because we will add a whole layer of headache more by consulting the people. But consulting the people is what a democracy is really about. I agree with the recommendation that when a national referendum is called, it's supposed to be binding. In 2008, there was a national referendum for an elected Senate. I never really got with it, but the majority did. And what happened to it? I no doubt you could find it in some shelf or the other in one of the government filing cabinets and such. Right? But yes, there's the executive, there's the legislative, there's the judiciary. And the vice chair was saying we have to give the judiciary a level of importance. It's the third arm of government. And you know something? It's secret between us. They get less than 1% of the budget. You ever look at the budget? The judiciary of this country gets about 1% or less. And their judges are subject to contracts that keep changing. How will the judges not be politically interfered with if they know that if they do things where the government doesn't like? No renewal of contract. Gone. So that has to change. I remember one of my teachers told me, he said, why don't you all elect your judges? Oh, that's a whole other thing. That's creating politicians rather than judges, but that's what the US has. They elect their judges. Right? I don't know. But the judiciary, the public service is one of the major entities in the Constitution also. And how is the public service working for you? Is it responsive, accountable, transparent? I shouldn't talk like that in the public service. But yes, and how can we make it more so as such? Let's look at what we can do with that. Let's look at how we can make sure that 106 or 105 down officers are truly hired and evaluated and on merit-based advance in the system. Let's try to truly make sure we eliminate this open vote contract type public service, big percentage of the public service. Because every politician knows those are the ones that we can put in and take out and put in and take out when we want. So, there are a lot of different areas. The other, what is called the other agencies of government. Other agencies of government are like the municipal system, right? We create an act to govern the municipal system, but we leave it flexible, and what do we end up with? You know, I live in Bamopan, and there's a city council governing me in Bamopan, and I keep trying to find out, because the mayor and the councillors don't agree, and whose decision rules? Should it be a caucus decision? Or can the mayor overrule the 6 councillors? Or can the councillors, how does that work? Right? How do these systems work in governance in other agencies of government, including how DFC works, Social Security works, UB, all of those semi-autonomous, all of those statutory statutory bodies. Because all of those statutory bodies are getting they're getting from the public purse. They're getting their monies from government, from taxpayers. So how do we make sure in the Constitution we look at that area there and we get them to really be more accountable, really practice good governance more effectively as such. So there are all of these elements, and there's a lot of ideas, right? There's a lot of ideas. We're talking to different people, we're getting different reports, different papers, we're getting presentation by different technical experts, and we're recording them or having them develop reports, and we're putting all of these things. We have a www page, we have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram account, we have a Twitter account, we have a TikTok account, in all of those areas, and we are trying to get them, all of these accounts, as active as possible, right? And we have signed MOUs with different media houses to give us a page or a half page to put out information, right? So that we are hopefully able to develop a much more interactive and open. This process is intended to be an open process. The 25 commissioners and their 25 alternates, because each commissioner has an alternate, are making sure that this process remains open. They represent different institutions, different agencies that are not going to allow a hidden agenda, a secret agenda. And we have heard them. We have heard people tell us that there's some type of secret agenda to this, right? Whether it's to prohibit somebody from running, or whether it's to... I remember a couple months ago they were saying we are trying to get God out of the Constitution. We haven't even made any type of proposal because we are consulting it. We can't say, okay, we'll get God out of the Constitution when the people haven't told us what they want yet. If the people want God in the Constitution, God stays in the Constitution. If the people tell us they don't want, then they don't want. And then in referendum, let the people decide. So there's different layers of making sure that this system is accountable to the Belizean people. Different layers. The representatives on the commission, the public education and consultation process, the bringing of the interim report back to the people to tell them, this is what you told us, is this it? Is this all? Do you agree with all of these ideas here? And then after that, we put together a final report, and if it is of significant, then it goes to referendum, and again, the people decide in a referendum. whether they want those changes or not. The point is that it is, as several speakers have alluded to over the day and over the months, this is a time to really take on a challenge and reform the Constitution. What was it that the minister said? Belizeanize it. Make it Belizean. Tell me about, there's a beautiful Westminster system that has gone through 1,000 years of existence in England, and so it must good. Is that what we want? Is that how we believe in governing ourselves? So these are the areas, people, whether it's in the whether in the fundamental rights. And a quick couple of things, and I think at least one of them was brought out. You know that there's no fundamental right to an education for our children. There is no fundamental right to an education for our children. Yet we have a compulsory education act. Well, if we want respect and believe in that compulsory education act, then we have to make it fundamental so that it serves everybody. And up to where is that fundamental right? Is it just primary school? Should it include high school? Because you know the high school population is only about what, 43%? So if it's going to include high school, we have to create a lot more high school space. Or we really need to go the IT vet VOTEC, because there's a lot of our people that their quality, their talent is in the VOTEC areas, right? And if you get certified as an electrician, or certified as a mason, or certified as a carpenter, you know that they get better salary than some of us public servants. They could earn better than us. But a lot of, like Santander said, I need so much certified electricians. Where will our electricians get that certification if we don't have a system? So we need to introduce and provide those types of systems. So there are these different elements in the Constitution, people. The Constitution is not going to solve all our problems, but the Constitution could really be a blueprint to helping us to create what is called enabling of an environment. But that means we have to make that Constitution really provide that enabling environment. Right? And so, there's all of these areas. The executive, the legislative, the fundamental. You know there's not a fundamental right to health care? You know that? We don't have a fundamental right to get basic health care. Okay. All right, so they tell me I talk too much. My time is... All right, so, you know, people, fundamental right, don't we all have a fundamental right to a home? Shouldn't we? A fundamental right to work, right? To earn a decent living. Right? So there's all of these elements. Those are the areas we want to, that's what we want to begin to break it up into, people. Look at the fundamental rights. Look at the executive. Look at the legislative. Look at the judiciary. Look at the public service. Look at the other agencies of government. Are those different things that are all in the Constitution working for us? And until we are comfortable with the understanding of it, then let's bring the ideas together, the recommendations. Let's think through those processes and bring together a better, much more responsive Constitution as such. Okay? So, if there is any questions, I don't have to leave right now, so if there are any questions, I can stay and answer.
Thank you, Director Ross. We still have some time for a round of questions. We want to finish at 3 o'clock, but I know the rice kind of dropped hard, right? So we want to try lighten it up a little bit and see if we can provoke a little bit more thought by having anyone who has any questions for Mr. Ross to raise it. If you have questions broadly, I invite comments like the principal's comments earlier. If anyone has any doubts about this process, please don't leave with the doubt. Raise the question so that we can have a discussion on it. I know you had throw. I see. I'm not sure if anybody remembers this booklet. Want to have it? So this is the booklet that we're going to be updating. It's a gem. It's an absolute gem for civics in this country. It does need some updating, so we're going to be republishing it with the permission of the government, but not a lot needs to change from the content, because the content of it is a very good look at our system that's laid out in our Constitution. So
Put it after 2:30. We don't want nobody to get wet. We're worried about you all getting wet, and out there is dark. You okay? Good.
all right. So anybody had any discussions over the lunch period about things that was bothering them that they want to raise? Okay, so let me go back to the book. So the book is just broken down into 6 parts. The first, it just has an introduction that lays out a bit of our history and our development. Then the part 1 goes into the Constitution and the rights that are there, some of the more important one. Part 2 deals with the legislative branch. Part 3 is the executive. Part 4, the public service. Now we've evolved that we have security services commissions, we have judicial and legal services commissions. Those weren't a part of the Constitution when this book was published, so we'd be updating those. The part number 5 deals with some government agencies, and the 6th part is the judiciary. So if you have a discussion with your class and you lay out those generally in the Constitution, that would be very helpful to any student to start to understand the structure of our governance structure. And I ask that we try to do that, because it's not until we start to understand our governance structure that we can start to question whether or not it's working or how we need to improve it. Any questions about that? Did anyone here learn anything about the Constitution today? I didn't hear the answer, sorry. Can someone share? Yes, someone has a mic. No? Can someone share one of the things that they learned today? Someone has the mic. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I don't want my teachers to be here for a long, so I won't be taking too much time. Nevertheless, it's good to have this reform. I have this query, which is, you mentioned that most of the people of Belize don't know their constitution, right? I was in Standard 4 some years, and I looked into this with my students. But it was just an outline, right? Basically what you were saying, the different parts in it, the branches, the rights. And it saddens my heart that I come from Sartaneja village, about 2 hours travel. And I've experienced this. When I was very young, we had some search entries from police. They would just enter a house, search, and move on, right? When I was younger, I learned about the need to have a document which has all that information. And when I learned this, they finally stopped on the door and they had to show this. And I was happy that I could help my family making a change on that. Right? And after they went and they came back and they showed us the paper, and they finally came in like people, because sometimes they do not respect these rights that we have. And as citizens, we don't know them. Right? I don't want to offend the high school teachers, but I don't recall getting any information on my constitution. Right? And now that I'm teaching to my kids, I try to go in depth, right, to have a deep dive with them and try to explain these things to them. But they are very young. And as you said, not all students have that opportunity to attend high school. So something has to be done, right? Something has to be done. Our people need to be educated on knowing their rights, knowing their constitution, their constitutional rights, what it entails. The next one, very, very important when we are looking at this change. Now that we are going to amend them, now that we are having this forum and the people are able to speak, then we need to input our citizens, getting to know them. One thing that I would like, we are far north. That's the end of the world for me right there. After Sartaneja, there's nothing. And maybe Corozal town can attest. There has been no development here in Corozal. I've been coming for years. And when we look at this, I think our teachers can attest, we are supervised. I mean, we have 2, 3, 4 supervisions per year, sometimes more. I learned this month that the priesthood brothers in the church are supervised. They have someone that come and look at doing their job. And we need that in government. I mean, we select our chairman, we select our village council, we select our vote for our town council, and they just forget about what they were voted in for, what is their task. So it would be an excellent way that we have them supervised, not knowing who is the one who is supervising, giving a report, giving suggestions, and we are not just there, and then they forget about what they went in to do. Right? This is just some thoughts I had. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Teacher, I want to thank you for those comments. I want teacher to give you one of the most important parts of the fundamental rights, that part of the Constitution, Article 20. I think it's important that I read it out for you, right? Because it's something I would like all of you to share with your students. You get these rights, and then a lot of people don't know what happens if those rights are violated, or how you determine if those rights are violated, right? So I just want to read this provision for you. I think Mr. Usher did it earlier, but it's so important to repeat. If any person alleges that any of the provisions of sections 3 to 9 which are where your rights are listed, is being or is likely to be contravened in relation to him, has been, is being, or is likely to be contravened, that person should go to the Supreme Court, now the High Court, to get redress. And I prefer the way Dickie Bradley says it. Redress at the Supreme Court, that one fancy name for your collect money, right? That's how you would address that. That's super important. There are other remedies that you can get, but I think we need to focus on that, because your second point speaks about the accountability provisions. That is one of our systems of accountability as it relates to our rights. So I just wanted to leave that with you. Article 20 of the Constitution is how we protect our rights, how we get the enforcement when our rights are violated. Okay, thank you so much, teacher. Chairman would like to add.
Ladies and gentlemen, the day is almost finished, and I just wanted you to bear in mind, when we look at the Constitution, and as I said earlier this morning, I don't profess to have any great knowledge on a document I've read, and I would be lying if I told you I understand what I read. I make that with no apology. So we need to learn what we have. But I wanted you to take home this thought. March 5th, the first Wednesday in March, by law, not by constitution, you go to the polls to elect a mayor, councillors. That is a law. Yet, if you look at the Constitution of Belize, there is no mention of municipal authority as an arm of government. There is no provision. I will tell you, in Belmopan, the budget we managed was around $8 million. You manage that for 3 years. That's $24 million. Should a mayor, first of all, should the Constitution of Belize not make mention of town boards, village councils, city councils, first of all? Secondly, if you pay a mayor and councillors, use Belmopan as an example, and this is back in 2000, 2006, $24 million, $8 million a year for 3 years. Should that constitution not say, unless you give the people an account of how you spent that money, you're not eligible for re-election? We keep going to the polls, putting money in a system, and we don't hold the system to give us an account of our money. There's a wide blank in here. When I mean blank, I mean it's void. And yet, as a democracy, every 3 years, not by constitution but by law, the first Wednesday in every March, we go to the polls. Don't you think municipal authorities should have a responsibility to account for the money that they've spent during their term of office? Let's look again, for example, at water boards. How many times have we heard in our country problems with water boards? Is there some political interference in the way water boards are structured and managed, where you have elected village councils, but maybe because they are of a different political color, water boards are removed, there is a constitutional right for you to choose the party of your choice. That should not be penalized because you did not choose the party that maybe won. You have a constitutional right to your job, employment, your property, your money. Property need not only be a building. So I would like to challenge teachers to, while you might not know a lot, like myself, about the Constitution, but look around your community. Look at your town boards, look at your village councils, look at areas that you feel if this was in a constitution and a law, somebody would have to give me an account and maybe we could have a better Belize because of these things. And we have several, a Facebook page, we have a website. You can go on the website and send in your concerns. It doesn't have to end here. To be able to participate and let us know what you're seeing in your community that you would like to see different. And just think about municipal elections that are coming up and the way we're going about doing that. I don't know if there's any other questions, Vice Chair.
The floor is open to anyone who has any comments, questions, concerns. Okay, what I'm going to do before we end, and I can start now.
Hello.
Yes.
Good afternoon. My question, and it's based on what Mr. Shanawana gave, and I think that would also go for area reps, for them to at least disclose their expenditures, because aren't they given an amount of money to distribute to their constituency? I don't know if the Constitution provides that, but one of my concern, and I would like to know as teacher, is especially like when it comes to ministry, I would like to know like when they are finished as their ministerial posts, do they continue receiving, I would say, a stipend or a salary for the rest of their life? Or is it like us teachers, when we are out of the profession, no more salary, that's it?
The current structure, and please if I'm wrong, the current structure is if a member of the House of Representatives serves 2 terms in office, that they become pensionable, and then that would be for the rest of their life. I could be wrong.
Glenfield? Yes. I think there was a question, there was a question asking me, it's a little muffled up here, asking if elected officials upon leaving office, if they receive money. Was that the question?
No, the question was, shouldn't the provisions for accountability from that you suggested for mayors also apply to elected officials for area representatives? That's correct, right, ma'am? The follow-up question was then the pension question for area representatives.
Yes.
We addressed, okay, so I'm making a note for the accountability for the area reps, and then I just left the other one as just a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Roman Reyes. I'm from the Orange Walk ITVET, and I want to pose some comments concerning the TVET system. Okay, many of us that work in the TVET system are presently on contract. Some of us have been in here 15, 17 years on single 1-year contract. Okay, we have been promised a lot of dreams that there will be a reform, that they will start to give us 5-year contract, that later on the system will get better. But there's a conflict in there where we are charged 25% interest, 25% income tax. Like the teachers, we are considered teachers when it's ready to teach, and public servant when hurricane and disaster come around. So they got us like 2 sides of the coin. Yet, under the labor law and the act, it is stated that if you're working on a contract, you should only pay 6% income tax. and it is deemed that if you pay 25% income tax, then you should become pensionable. They mentioned it just now that the ministers and the electrical people, they serve 2 terms and they get a pension. We have us, and not only us that are contract workers in education, you have contract workers in the medical field that work on contract all their life. And when they finish, the only pension they get is from Social Security. They don't get one from government. And then when it's time for them to process your contract gratuity, sometimes it goes from 2 months to a year. You don't get your payment done. You get bumped off the payroll, sometimes 3-6 months. Technicians out there that go to work in the TVET system, they are based on the government pay scale. And some of them is not on your experience. And if you do have experience, they do not know how to pay you for your qualification. So you get a pay scale, honorary pay scale, so that when you're finished, that is why, and one of the main reasons why IT vets have problem retaining teachers as technician instructors, because private sector, you work for yourself. Why should I sit down in a classroom and collect a $2,000 salary when I could work out there and work for myself and I'm making $4,000 or $5,000 a month? Maybe I do that in a week. And this is where the reform in the system comes. There's a complication between the labor law, how much the labor law says you should get taxed, and how much they actually tax you. You don't get a pension. You don't get any redemption at the end of the year. Apart from that, the TVETs are the one producing technicians that are fixing your light, fixing your AC unit, running your cars, make sure all of these systems work. These are the backbone of the country and economy. Right? So we have been put all the way to the back. And just lately we have gained some momentum and become have their little focus on us, and they're talking a little bit more about the TVET. But there is one other thing I want you to consider when you're reforming this constitution, is the Occupation Safety Health Act. That will help us a lot. That will give us a lot of clout. And the Safety Health Act would mean that you will need to reform the labor laws, because then your payment will be deemed by the risk you take to do your job. Okay? This will then mean, like in some cases, some teachers that take higher risk job will then get a higher pay than a teacher that teach welding or construction will then get a higher pay than somebody that's teaching English, because English you just sit down in a classroom. But in construction, you're working on a scaffold, you're working cement, you're working in the field, you're working in the sun. If you're working with electricity, you're working with danger. So then, this is where the OSHA Act will come into effect. And if it does get passed, and we hope, because they have it on the back burner for years, hopefully they do pass it, and that will clear up all the problem and the nightmare that we're going through at this time.
Thank you very much, sir. English is hard for me, so I just want to say I'm grateful for my English teachers, because I know I'm because they help some hazard, like, when they teach me, but I take your point, sir. It's well received. I've made your point that the OSH needs to be implemented. Is that adequate, or would you like me to add more to your point? OSH needs to be implemented. I have the concerns also about the one-year contracts and the not getting pension and the need for reform for that, as well as the time for pensions to be processed. That particular one, time for pensions being processed, is being echoed around the country, I can tell you that.
I also wanted to ask you to think about
Touch on. That's not in there.
about whether or not your constitution should strengthen your right to a clean environment. I remember, for example, the fish kill and the damage in the New River. And we listen to sometimes the dust, pollution, smoke, loud noise. Pollution could be decibel levels of loud motorcycles, loud music. That you work hard at school, you need your day of rest, and sometimes you feel you're deprived of your right to a quality of life with your environment. As I said, when you go home and you look at your country through the eyes of your community, whatever you see, I would want to bet that that is what is seen across the country. We have an opportunity to look at your rights and to see how we can strengthen them. And one of the things that could be considered is your right to a clean environment. That is your constitutional right, that your children have a right to a safe environment in which to play. So let not the conversation end here when we part company and wishing everybody Godspeed home. But think about these things, and please, besides the survey that we are asking you to do, and even if you didn't do it today, I think Ms. Schumann said she will share the link. But please bear this in mind. This is an online survey that is going to be launched in September. We want to put it into the diaspora, the Belizeans living abroad, that we also have to consult. We would like to ask you, if you've taken a survey, please don't take it again. Because what we want to avoid is a double entry on the same question. But there will be a short survey. We're looking to see how, under the rights of the child, for children, I think it's 12 years and older, 16, 12, under the rights of the child, to be able to participate in what do they want to see in their country through their parents. And so we'll be working very closely with the Ministry of Education to declare September Constitution Month. One of the things that we will be doing is we're going to be hosting some national debates among high schools and tertiary level institutions. We have an Education and Communication Technical Committee that's developing a question on what do they want to resolve. For example, be it resolved that Belize moves away from the Westminster system to a Republican. Be it resolved that there be fixed term limits on the government. Be it resolved that there's security of tenure of the judiciary. And we get thematic committees of the Constitution into the minds of the young people. Although we say they are the future, but they're also the present. They have a life that they're engaged in that we're in maybe control of, but they're affected. And so we wanted to find a way through the school system to host these debates. And the champion of this debate will debate young Belizeans living abroad on what they would like to see in their country. And we're trying to see if we could do this in the month of September as a way to create a greater awareness of the importance of this Constitution. So, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the People's Constitution Commission, I would like to thank the organizers of this event, especially Commissioner Ruth Schumann and Joanna and all her team, district support staff, all the teachers, principals, dean, and everyone who participated in this event in one way or the other and participated in taking the survey. I wanted to tell you thank you, but please, the conversation does not end here. Please look up our website, share your views with us, your thoughts, and please help us make Belize, for all of us, a better place. Godspeed, and thank you very much. Good evening.